You might want to grab some tape and seal your jaw shut because the chances of it hitting the floor after hearing this story are pretty high. But don't worry, this is the best possible ending to the worst story. This is the story of Alison Bata, one of the most shocking stories I've ever heard to this day. Before we begin, I just want to say, Alison, if you ever see this, you are an inspiration to so many people. I admire you deeply. Now, let's get into it. The two perpetrators that Alison had the misfortune of encountering were Franz and Theuns. Here's some background on them. Franz was the son of a police officer. His childhood was fine, but as a teenager, things took a turn for the worse. He fell in with the wrong crowd, became a menace, and eventually got expelled from school. This led his family to move to what was then known as Port Elizabeth in South Africa. One of Franz's biggest obsessions became worshiping the devil. He started dating a girl who claimed to be the head witch of a coven, and together they spent their time performing rituals and trying to summon demons. I know that Satanism doesn't always mean devil worship, but in this case, it absolutely did. Franz soon dropped out of school entirely and started claiming that he was possessed by the devil. Then, he joined the army. Think about how terrifying that is. A man who believes he's possessed, now surrounded by weapons. He eventually left the army, got married, had a child, abandoned his family, got married again, and had another child. Throughout all of this, he continued getting into trouble with the law, committing petty crimes, and insisting that he had supernatural powers granted by Satan himself. At 26 years old, Franz met 19-year-old Theuns. Theuns had a rough upbringing. He wasn't born into the best circumstances. At 15, he dropped out of school, turned to substance abuse, got involved in petty crime, and eventually joined the army. That was one of the things he and Franz had in common. But just like Franz, Theuns also dated a girl who identified as a witch, and together, they worshipped the devil. Franz and Theuns met in June 1994, and together they became a deadly duo. Franz convinced Theuns that he had supernatural powers, and Theuns began to look up to him. The two started committing horrific acts. They frequently visited graveyards at night, engaging in strange rituals, and then went on violent sprees. They would go out specifically looking for women to attack simply because they wanted to. Franz, in particular, believed he was so attractive that women should automatically desire him, and he thought he deserved to take whatever he wanted. Sick. Absolutely sick. On December 4th, 1994, Franz and Theuns assaulted a 21-year-old woman who was 3 months pregnant. After the attack, she immediately went to the police and reported them. The two were arrested but released pending a court appearance. And before that court date arrived, they found another victim, Alison Bata. What Alison went through that night is something no human being should ever have to endure, let alone survive. The fact that she did is nothing short of a miracle. Alison Bata grew up in a loving home. Her mother raised her to be a kind and compassionate person. By the time of this case, Alison was 27 years old, living her best life. She had finished school, traveled for a few years, and finally settled in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. On December 18th, 1994, a Sunday, Alison had a fun night out with her friends. After dropping one of them off at her apartment, she pulled into her parking lot, parked, and turned off her car. Suddenly, her driver's side door was flung open. Standing outside was 26-year-old Franz, holding a knife. He looked at her and said, "Move over or I will kill you." At first, Franz kept telling Alison that he wasn't going to hurt her, that he just needed her car, a blatant lie. He asked for her name, and thinking quickly, she gave him a fake one. She then asked for his, and he also lied. Alison remained remarkably calm, trying to talk him into letting her go. She told him he could keep the car, but of course, he had other plans. He said he needed to pick up his friend. That friend was 19-year-old Theuns. When he got into the back seat of the car, Alison noticed his eyes. They were dark, empty, pure evil. It must have been gut-wrenching for her. Franz drove them to a secluded area. He got out, leaving Theuns and Alison in the car. Then he turned to her and asked, "Are you going to fight?" before brutally assaulting her. Alison, in that moment, remembered trying to keep her dignity, aware of what was going on. But she kept thinking to herself, "He is doing this to your body, not to you. Your mind is safe. He can't touch your mind. You will get through this." After repeating that to herself over and over again, she tried to disassociate from what was going on, from the terrible situation she was in. After Franz was done, he looked at Theon's outside of the car and asked him if he wanted to essay Allison, talking about her in the most degrading manner. Theon said yes, and he went in the car and took his turn, essaying her. After that, the two of them stood there and discussed whether they should let Allison go or kill her. And remember, the two of them were pending a court appearance for the SA case they had just committed 14 days ago. So, in their little pea-sized brains, they thought, no, we shouldn't let her go. Because if we let her go and she goes to the police, we will get in more trouble. So the two of them thought they had no other choice but to murder her. They were having this discussion right in front of Allison, and because their brains were so small, they were talking amongst themselves, using their real names, Franz and Theons. Allison took note of that, which was very important. Before she knew it, Allison was outside of the car on the ground. Franz was on top of her, attacking her with both of his hands around her neck, using as much force as he could to the point where he crushed her windpipe, cutting off her air supply completely, causing Allison to zone out. Then Franz grabbed the sharp weapon, took it to Allison's stomach over and over again in a frenzy, 35 times. He and Theons thought that would be it, but then they realized that Allison was still alive. So they took the sharp weapon and went across her neck 16 times. And remember, Franz had crushed Allison's windpipe with his hands. Unknowingly, when he took the sharp weapon, he struck her windpipe, giving her an air supply again. So basically, he did the opposite of what he was trying to do. Allison regained consciousness when she heard Franz and Theons talking amongst themselves about whether or not they thought she was still alive. When she heard this, she stayed as still as she possibly could to make them think that she wasn't. It worked. They left her there, deciding that there was no possible way she could have survived that attack. They threw her clothes that were inside of the car out of the car and drove off in her car. Allison was left there, lying on the ground in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, attempting to assess the situation, trying to figure out what to do next. I don't even know how she had the strength to come up with a clear thought, but she was trying to think when she heard a gurgling sound. She was confused for a second, until she realized that the sound was coming from her throat. The sound was her windpipe going in and out through it because she couldn't control it. She went to feel her neck with her hand, but she felt nothing because her injuries were so severe. There was just a massive gaping hole, and she felt nothing but blood. Allison laid on that floor when she thought, I'm not gonna let them get away with this. I'm not gonna let them do this to another person. She thought that, at the very least, she would do what she could to help and try to get her attackers caught, which is when she took the little strength she had left and wrote their names in the sand, Franz and Theons. Right after that, she wrote in the sand what she wanted people to know before she passed. Then Allison continued to lay there thinking that this was the end, but it wasn't. Allison has said, I realized my life was too valuable to let go of, and that gave me the courage to survive. That gives me chills every time. Also, now is a good time for me to tell you, if you have a queasy stomach, you should probably go. Allison started to move, thinking, I may as well give it my all. I'm not going to go down without a fight. When she started to get up on her feet, she was on her hands and knees when she felt something wet and slimy on her feet. It was her intestines. Franz and Theons had injured her abdomen so badly that her intestines were falling out of her body. She struggled, trying to gather them back together and put them back inside of her. When she noticed that her shirt had been thrown out of the car, she grabbed the shirt and used it to pack her intestines inside of her, pulling it as close as she could against her to try and keep them in. Allison tried to stand back up again, but then her vision went black. She couldn't see anything. So she was holding her intestines in with one hand, and with the other, she reached up to her eyes to see what was going on, but she felt nothing. There was nothing there because of the injuries to her neck and her throat. Her head was hanging backwards. She couldn't see because her head was halfway detached from her body. So, with her only free hand, she reached up to her head, behind her body, pulled her head forward, and kind of back in place, helping her vision return temporarily. She was literally holding her body together with both hands. I have no clue how much strength that must have taken. It's hard for me to comprehend. Allison managed to drag herself onto the road, the full moon lighting her path, hoping that somebody would stop and rescue her. When she got to the road, she collapsed. She saw headlights. One car drove towards her, but straight past her. But the second car stopped, thankfully. In that car was a man called Tian, not to be confused with the perpetrator. Tian and other people were in the car as well, but he was a vet, so he had some medical knowledge. He was an absolute hero that night. As soon as he saw Allison's injuries, he ripped off his shirt and used it to apply pressure on Allison's injuries. Tien also noticed that Allison's thyroid was out of her neck, and he had some knowledge of medicine, so he knew how to place the thyroid back in place somehow. While one of his other friends called 911, the ambulance took so long to get there, 2 whole hours, but the entire time, Tien was trying to do everything he could to keep Allison with him. Tien continued to care for Allison while waiting for the ambulance to arrive. When the ambulance finally showed up, the medical team did everything they could to assist Allison, but her condition was extremely critical. They quickly rushed her to the hospital for emergency surgery. Allison underwent several surgeries and a long recovery process. Doctors said that she survived in a miraculous way, and no one could explain how she made it through such severe injuries. Throughout her recovery, Allison kept a strong spirit and a determination to survive. She recalled what happened to her and tried to find a way to bring her attackers to justice. Franz and Theuns were eventually caught and brought to trial. Both were convicted of multiple charges. They pled guilty, and in August 1995, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the attack, Allison was discharged from the hospital on New Year's Eve. She moved back in with her mother, who helped take care of her, but she still had a long way to go in her recovery, not only physically but emotionally as well. Despite all she had been through, Allison knew she wanted to use her experience to help others. She began traveling the world, sharing her story, and inspiring other survivors to come forward. Since then, Allison has written 2 books, and she has said, "The attack has put me on this path, where I get to travel the world and help inspire other people." Allison later met and married a man, although they are now separated. Doctors had told her that because of her injuries, she would never be able to have children. But to everyone's amazement, Allison fell pregnant and was able to carry her child to term. And here's a beautiful twist. Tian, the hero who saved Allison's life, went on to become a doctor. He was one of the doctors who helped bring Allison's second child into the world. However, there's one more thing that will make you mad. In July 2023, after only serving 28 years, Franz and Theuns were granted parole and were placed under supervision. When that happened, Allison posted on her Facebook page saying, "The day I hoped and prayed would never come. I was asked, how will you feel if they ever get parole? My immediate answer was always, I'm hoping I'll never find out." This is absurd. The people who did that to Allison were allowed to walk free. But here's the good news. This year, in 2025, the decision to grant them parole was overturned, and both were sent back to jail. They will remain in custody, which brings relief to Allison and her supporters. To end this, I want to share a quote from Allison. "Remind yourself that you do not have to take responsibility for what others do. Life is not a collection of what happens to you, but of how you've responded to what has happened to you."